Elliot Colburn, elected in 2019 as the Conservative MP. You're only 30, which means you got elected when you were 27. Shouldn't you be out partying at that age?
You'd think so, but it was right place, right time for me. My predecessor as the Conservative candidate had done a number of attempts and decided that he really didn't want to put himself through it again. And Carshalton and Wallington has always been my home, born there, raised there, worked there, the lot. And I knew that I would regret it if I didn't go for it at that time and someone else had the privilege to do it, and I didn't know if I'd ever have another opportunity. For me, it was personal. I didn't want to just go to any seat around the country. When I went for my selections, that was the only one that was for me. So I had to do it at that time, and even with everything that's happened over the past few years, I wouldn't change my mind.
What's been the hardest thing over the past few years?
Oh, now you're really testing me. There's been many. I think the beginning of the pandemic was probably the most difficult, when we were dealing with, my team and I were dealing with just a huge volume of correspondence, way above what MPs normally get, but hearing the most heart-wrenching stories of people who were struggling to navigate this new thing that we all were. But we had to try and understand the guidance and understand the support that was in place very quickly and then try and pass that on to people. And we were doing 14, 15-hour days for about 6 weeks, non-stop, to try and get through all of the queries. And even then, we were exhausted. We were absolutely exhausted. And I think that definitely was the hardest. There's been other really tough moments, but I think that it sticks in my mind as the hardest that I've ever had to deal with.
Okay. So you are an out gay man.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen lovely pictures of you with your partner. How old were you when you came out?
I was 11, relatively young. I was really, really lucky to have a massively supportive family and a school, actually, that was quite ahead of its time in teaching RSC, but in an LGBT inclusive way.
Really?
Way before any of this was mandatory. And so I was very, very lucky. I had a great support mechanism around me. And I think that really was a bit of a shock when I got older and I experienced discrimination for the first time or saw it directed at other people. Because to be brutally honest, for the first few years of my out life, I didn't really experience it. And perhaps that was naivety because of how young I was, but I was incredibly lucky. And it was a bit of a shock to me later on that sort of prejudice still existed.
Is there a moment that sticks in your mind about the prejudice? We're going to come into something that happened to you as an MP in a moment. But is there something in your normal life when you first remember, gosh, this is hate?
Yeah, I think it was actually during the election campaign before I was elected as an MP. I'd obviously seen and experienced homophobia before, but I think it really hit home for me. There was this moment when I was on Wallington High Street, one of the largest high streets in my patch, and this guy came up to me and said, I was going to vote for you, but I found out that you're gay. That's disgusting. I'm voting for the Brexit Party. And I just remember thinking to myself, I don't know how to respond to that. You're literally choosing who you vote for on a personal characteristic. And I just thought to myself, wow, I don't know how to respond. I don't know how to react to this. And I did just sort of stand there a bit in shock, really. I didn't say anything back. He walked away. And that stuck with me. Because I really didn't know how to react in that situation because I thought this is so irrational. You know, you could not vote for a political party or a candidate for a myriad of reasons, but I'm not sure that's the best argument to make.
Gosh, this made me shiver that. It's horrible. Now, a couple of years ago, you received a letter calling you Tory scum and telling you and your fag boyfriend to watch your backs. Did the police catch that person?
No, sadly not. And I do not for 1 minute blame the police about that. I understand how difficult it is to actually track people down, particularly when it's in letter form.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was before I had any CCTV footage, so I could not provide anything. I literally, all I could provide was the letter. And unless they were on the police database, there was no way to track them. But it was chilling. And that was the first time that I really fully understood the effect that being an MP can have on the people around you, because we do make sacrifices, but we ask the people in our lives, our friends, our family, our loved ones, to put up with a lot. My mum, for example, has come completely off social media.
She doesn't want to read.
Doesn't want to read it. And I just said, do you want to just come off some of these groups? You want to unfollow my page and stuff so that you can stay in contact with your friends, but not see what people say about me. And she said, no, I'd just be too tempted and it's too hard. But we do ask people to put up with a lot. And that was the first time I think I fully appreciated what we ask the people around us to put up with.
So that was in 2021. Hopefully that was the last horrible incident of abuse that you've been subject to. Is that right?
It was.
Great. Good.
Yeah.
Now, let's have a look at some of the campaigns that you're involved in. Of course, you're a big constituency MP. There's loads that is written about that you do locally. You've called for LGBT plus conversion therapy to be made illegal. The government say that they're going to, but they've been saying that for quite a while now. Why are they dragging their feet, and what are you going to do to stop the feet dragging on this?
No, you're absolutely right. We have now got to a place where, thankfully, we have, I think, got a settled agreement with the government that they are going to do this. There was, as you know, there was a lot of confusion as to whether it would happen at all, whether or not it would include the entirety of the LGBT plus community. We are now waiting for the announcement of what we call pre-legislative scrutiny, which is quite an unusual tool for Parliament to use, as you know, before presenting a bill to Parliament. What we're concerned about at the moment, and those of us who are campaigning on this, is that we've been waiting for that now for some time, and we're about to come to the end of the parliamentary session. We want to just get this off the ground. It's relatively straightforward legislation. It really is. All it is asking is for no one to be subjected to abuse because of their identity. And it's a relatively simple concept in my mind. But sadly, because of the very loud and toxic debate that has started, particularly around the trans community, but other parts of the LGBT community as well, I think that's the reason that there's been such a delay, because the government, I think, are struggling to navigate that minefield.
Have you met anyone, friends or constituents, who have been subject or who've been through conversion, so-called conversion therapy?
Yeah, sadly, and a range of them as well. Some from years ago who were subjected to practices that, of course, are already illegal.
Just detail some examples. You don't need to name any names, but just so people understand what conversion therapy entails.
So some of the more recent examples I've had from constituents who are being subjected to things that are still legal are things such as deliverance prayer, exorcisms and things like that. I had one constituent who had to go to their place of worship 7 days a week and was subjected to hours and hours of groups of religious leaders praying over them, literally over them, laying them down and having them pray over their body, speaking in tongues and things like that, saying things like, devil get out, devil get out. And that is a form, to me, that is a form of emotional abuse. And I'd even go so far as to say it's torture. That's a lot to subject someone to. And that's still happening in our country today. Of course, a lot of the stories that you hear of shock therapy, of corrective rape and things like that, of course, they're already illegal. And we absolutely accept that. But there are practices, pseudo-religious and pseudo-psychological practices that are still happening today, dressed up as legitimate therapy, which seek to change someone's identity, and that's what I don't think is right.
And you've also said previously that you were 100% fighting for trans rights. What in particular are you fighting for? Is there anything in particular?
To be honest, how I view that has changed slightly over the years. Originally, when I first got elected, I thought it was just delivering on the 2018 action plan. But now, for me, the number one priority is trying to take the heat out of the national discussion around trans issues, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, but there's also a lot of anger. And there are legitimate conversations to be had, and there are legitimate concerns that need to be addressed. And I think actually the number one priority at the moment is finding a way to navigate through so that we can have a respectful conversation on the issue. That I wouldn't have said a few years ago, because I just assumed that we were going to go ahead with what was already in place. But there has been this massive furore, and I think we really do need to try and take the heat out of it.
Final question, bit of politics. So you took the seat at the last election for the first time you were first elected, you took the seat from the Liberal Democrats, a majority of about 600. So this is the blue wall that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Lots of focus on the red wall, but also the received wisdom is that the Conservatives are going to have a problem, perhaps a bigger problem, in the blue wall. Can you tell me in a sentence or two what you need to do to maintain, or what the Conservatives need to do to maintain that coalition that you represent?
Very quickly, nationally, demonstrate economic competence again. Locally, demonstrate that you are a hard-working local champion there for the people that you represent, and that they weren't wrong to put their trust in you in the first place. And that's precisely what I'm trying to demonstrate to my Carshalton and Wallington constituents.
Elliot Colburn, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.